tested on that later. Okay, I have a message. This is actually a continuation of last week's message. Be Set Apart has been the series, the Kingdom of Heaven series. Last week we talked about clean and unclean, how you become clean, how you become unclean and how you can stay clean. And this week we have to talk about the mikvah, the immersion. Mikvah is a pool, and we're going to talk about what we have to do to become clean. Yahweh, open our eyes that we might see wonders from your word. When a person becomes unclean until evening, that's the terminology used in the Torah, they must bathe their body in water, which is also the terminology used in the Torah. Well, we talked last week about how to become unclean or how to stay clean. Y'all watch that video. It's online. The objective in what they did in the wilderness was they would go to a mikvah, which is a pool, like we see here. It's a pool of living water. It's a ritual pool or bath. It's called Mayim Chaim, or living waters. That means water flows in and flows out. The Dead Sea is dead because it's not Mayim Chaim. It's not living water. Water sort of flows in and it just stays there. The mikvah is a place where immersion takes place. I know we use the word mikvah to mean immersion, but that word is Tevilah. You can't mikvah because the mikvah is where you do immersion. There are ancient mikvot, that's plural for mikvahs, all over the place in Israel and elsewhere, and they consist usually of a pool of some kind or a thing to hold water. It's got to be deep enough that you can get wet all the way down. Water flows in, water flows out. Around the temple, there are many mikvah that they found. These were a place where someone could become ritually clean before entering into the temple. It's really important to be clean when you enter into the temple, because to be unclean has consequences. We talked about that last week. Now there's a group of people called the Essenes. In the days of Yeshua, there were around 31 sects of Judaism. Pharisees are the ones everybody knows about, and they seem to get the bad rap all the time. But the Pharisees were, they're kind of like the Baptists of Judaism. They were a very large sect of Judaism. But the Essenes were a little smaller, and they had some pretty strict rules. They conducted their lives biblically strict. Now, when they went out into the world, they go down to marketplace to buy stuff, or they go do stuff, they study, or whatever it was that they went and did, they would pick up what we called last week spiritual road dust. And before entering into their place, they would go through the mikvah and do immersion. So every day the guy goes down to his job, and every night when he comes back home, he takes a mikvah, or an immersion. It's not a one-time thing. We'll get into that a little bit later. It's a thing that we can do continuously. And he's ritually washing off the spiritual road dust of where he was. He may have become unclean by touching something dead or something along that nature. There are modern mikvah in many synagogues. These are places where people can do an immersion prior to serving or something of this nature. This is a picture of one of them. They're really nice. This is, again, living water. Water flows in, flows out. There's several restored mikvah in various European countries that they're finding all over the place. This is one picture of one, and then I have another picture, which I didn't bother to include, of one in the Netherlands that they found, and the local Jewish population is trying to restore it to whatever condition it was in before. So they're pretty neat places. It just so happens you can use natural bodies of water, such as the Jordan River. This is where it is. There's quite a few places. It seems to me that every Christian visitor to Israel has to run down to the Jordan and get baptized. This is what it's for. And the Jordan River is Mayim Haim, and the water is flowing through it. Other natural bodies of water, this was a reservoir, and at Sukkot, this particular group of people did immersion in that. Yeah, that's Rick there, Rick and Deb on the far left. Okay, and it was muddy, and the water got unshallow real fast. So if you took 4 steps, you were in way over your head. Yeah, and it was cold, yeah. Okay, let's talk about immersion. The Torah tells us that in order to enter a state of this ritual purity, in order to become ritually clean, you are to bathe. You are to immerse in a natural flowing water, and it's a symbolic act of purification. It's called immersion, as in, going all the way under immersion. The water it's not to clean you. Take a shower beforehand. And the people that did these things, okay, in the Torah it talks about one place, the guy that goes and does the red heifer ashes. Now, he's unclean. It's not a sin thing, it's just he's unclean. And it says he has to go down to wherever and wash his body. So he went to whatever river, creek, or whatever it is that they had there and washed. He washes his clothes, he washes his body. Now, he probably washed all the dust and the stuff that he got on him from ashes of a red heifer. I'm sure that was kind of a messy job. And then he did this mikvah, or this immersion in the mikvah. And he would still be unclean until evening. So at sundown, or after sundown, now he's clean again. It's just a ritual cleanness. You think about this. Them guys in the temple are handling dead stuff a lot. Now these are Levites. They're having to take carcass material, skin and other stuff, and remove it from either the tabernacle in the days of the tabernacle, or in the temple days they had to take that stuff out. Well, they're unclean. So they have to go through some process to become clean again to continue to minister. You will also notice that the Levite, the high priest, before he does stuff, he has to go through a process to become ritually clean. That includes a sin offering. Before he went into the Holy of Holies, you got to know that those guys did it really careful. Whatever rules existed, they followed those rules to the letter. They did not want to accidentally miss something and then go walk into the Holy of Holies. Because this is why they it says that they tied ropes around the ankles of the high priest when he went into the Holy of Holies, so they could drag out the dead carcass if you made a mistake. You don't want to leave it in there, it's going to smell bad after a while. So this stuff has to be done. Now, this is Yahweh's stuff. This is what he wants. And it's not our place to question and say, well, aren't you getting a little legalistic about things? No. The immersion process removes ritual impurity, and then the person's considered ritually clean, ritually pure. He's now, or she is now, eligible to participate in the ritual life of Israel. They can do stuff. They can go into in today's world, they would be able to go into synagogue. They would be able to do lots of stuff. The mikvah symbolizes moving, or the immersion symbolizes moving from one state to another. We were ritually unclean, go through immersion. We are now ritually clean. We move from the state of unclean to clean, from tameh to tahor. We used those two words last week. Immersion creates a change of status. This is important for us to see. When a believer is moving from one state to another, such as a person ready for an ordination or becoming a teacher or some other kind of pastoring sort of function, this is done. The immersion. There's a long list of reasons to do immersion, and the term that you may be familiar with is born again. When you're graduating or advancing from, most of what at that time it was a religious school, after an internal change of heart, such as bitterness towards a person, it's been resolved. This immersion creates that born-again status. Therefore, Yeshua's immersion by Yochanan ha-Matvil, which is Yochanan the immerser, not the Baptist, because you want to think that, he wasn't a Baptist. Yeshua's immersion was a public statement that he was starting his ministry. Now, quite frankly, he didn't need immersion for sin issues, okay? We got that part. But he was changing his status from being not a minister to being a minister, because he now spent the next 3.5 years ministering and teaching us Torah. He came to teach the Torah properly. The whole immersion thing, this is the only picture I could find where he wasn't being dunked backwards or sprinkled or something else. In actual fact, and this is how I conduct immersion, I don't dunk you. The guy standing there is the witness to see that you did take immersion, that you actually went all the way down, that you got all the way wet. He's an attendant. He may hear your confession if there's a confession, or he may hear your statement of faith if there's something of that nature. How often should you perform Tevilah immersion? After a person becomes unclean. We talked here last week about some of you farmer types, you handle dead critters like all the time. There's the chicken or the lamb or whatever that dies during the night. You have to handle it. This is a way to become clean again. We talked about a woman in Nidah. When a woman has her time, she is unclean. You're not supposed to touch her. And in the days of the camp, she had to leave the camp because the camp was clean. So she went outside the camp, and she went to a place that was where all the other women went. It wasn't like she was banished or some kind of terrible thing. Nothing like that at all. It's a normal thing that happens after she has a baby. there's certain period of time she is unclean. That's the way it is. Men become unclean when they have an emission, or when both men and women become unclean when you got a cut and the scab sort of forms that icky stuff underneath it. That's unclean stuff. So you're unclean. Now, nowadays in some modern synagogues, they have a place where the woman can go, and you know, the Rebbitzin or some other members of the synagogue witnesses or helps her attend to her purification. And it's a pretty cool thing. It is often done before the fall festivals and before the spring festivals. Some people do it every Sabbath preparation day, either Friday or on Sabbath morning. It's not a one-time thing. Scripture talks about, well, Rav Shaul talks about circumcision not even being a one-time thing. So there's a circumcision of the heart process. So look in Colossians chapter 2, verses 10 and 12. And he talks about kind of like a second or another circumcision, which is another change of heart. So that's where this is coming from. The whole idea of the immersion is you are buried with, when you go underwater, you're buried with Yeshua, and when you arise, you are now born again. You see, look in, I don't want to go into this in any more detail than just telling you, there it is. Because I've done this message before in churches as a Sunday school thing, and I was just, oh my goodness, yelled at for, well, I've already been baptized. I don't need to do it ever again. Okay, Tevilah, immersion in Yeshua, is what he was talking about in Colossians. It's a circumcision of the heart thing. It's a change of status of the heart thing. It's a revelation to our spirit. It's not a head thing. That's why it's got nothing to do with washing your dirt off. That's body stuff. That's flesh stuff. The whole immersion thing is a heart thing. It takes place in the heart. Back to Torah through immersion, this happens, especially as we enter the fall feast. The fall feast, the first 30 days, we're talking about the month of Elul, the month of Teshuvah, the month of repentance. By immersion, we're saying Yahweh has so changed our life that we make this official statement. The immersion of Messiah is a change of status from self-ownership to him. He owns you now. Now I want to get to the practical. This is what I've worked up to, because I only have a few more minutes. We do collect spiritual road dust as we go along. It happens. And you can define that any way you wish. We want to clean it off. One way to do so is through the immersion process. People that become unclean either through natural process like a woman in Nidah, or some other process, a cut or sexual relations or things of that nature, you may want to do immersion just to change from that unclean state to a clean state. Here's what you can do. I picked these three things: swimming pools, lake or stream. Now, swimming pools, okay, this is my opinion. All right, I'm just going to tell you my opinion. Some Messianic congregations would throw my opinion out. It's the way it is. Hey, tough. Some swimming pools could not be considered living water because the water doesn't flow in and out. You want to come to our house and see what a living water swimming pool looks like? It's full of living things. It's green, and it has fish in it because we put fish in it. We have done this, the swimming pool thing. Lakes, streams, for the most part, lakes are living water. Definitely a stream is living water. Ocean is a really great place, but we don't live close to one of those. Now, fall time is uncomfortable to do a swimming pool. We've done, whoa, we did this. So this is my solution, the shower. Okay, this will be rejected by some, but hang on here, okay? You're going to take a shower before Sabbath. I hope so. Get your washing stuff all done, your hair, all that other kind of thing. Pause for a moment. There's a blessing for everything. So there's a blessing before the mikvah. You say your blessing. If you can't remember what it is, you know, blessed are you, Yahweh our Elohim, King of the universe, who commands us concerning immersion. That's all you have to say. Get as much of you under the water as you can. For some of us, like myself, that's a little difficult. Get it all over. What? Do all that kind of stuff. Get it off. Get the unclean off. You are doing a ritual thing, but you know what you're doing. It's a change of heart thing, so that's you're actually accomplishing something. You know it in your mind. So it actually just, you're kind of pretending you're in a mikvah, a thing. Get it all washed off and say your final blessing and get out and dry yourself. This is how a woman can accomplish her issues with nidah. At the end of her period, she can go do this in the privacy of her own bathroom. It's not meant to be a public thing. As a matter of fact, when we do public immersions, should not do men and women together. That's personal opinion. Men go over here, women go over here, and you don't even look at each other. Please. It's not supposed to be that kind of a thing. I think I'm going to drop that part. I'm not going to discuss that, sorry. There's the privacy thing allows you to be fully unclothed. That's the nice way to say that. So that you can have your body in contact with the water. Synagogues that have a mikveh for the women, it is really a private thing. You don't even know they're going in there. So remember we talked about the unclean when a woman is in her period. Men do not touch a woman who's unclean. And in some Orthodox communities, men and women never hug. Okay? Men will not hold their wives' hands. We talked about that. You have like a hanky or something between them. And they won't do it when the woman does not have her period. That way no one knows what's going on. It's a private matter. So they do have a private issue. You can go ahead and you can do your Tevilah, your immersion in your bathroom, and no one knows but you and Yahweh. You have just taken care of your unclean problem. You know, Pastor and I were talking, what happens when you pick, the cat drags something in on Sabbath morning. That's what Margaret's cat did all the time. It's the responsibility of Pastor Larry and I to teach you the difference between the set apart and the profane, and what is clean and what is not clean, and how to take care of those issues. Shalom, y'all.